4.03 Russia Rising. This goes along with your student workbook pages 109 to 111, your Human Odyssey reading pages 164 to 175. Lesson Introduction, Russia Rising. The title of this unit is New Powers in Asia, and this chapter is Russia Rising. But wait, isn't Moscow the Russian capital in Europe? Yes, it is, and so are 3/4 of the Russian people. But 3/4 of Russia's land is in Asia. Confusing but true. Russia, by far the biggest country in the world, extends from the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea and covers some of the coldest regions on Earth. Its rich and varied history and culture include Viking traders, Byzantine religion and art, Mongol invaders, rulers named for Rome's Caesar, and centuries of isolation. Lesson objectives. Identify Russia as the largest country in the world, define Kremlin and explain Ivan's purpose in restoring the Kremlin in Moscow, describe the methods Ivan the Great used to conquer Russia and then unify and glorify it, describe the Mongol conquest of Russia, identify Ivan III as Ivan the Great and describe his accomplishments, identify Ivan IV as Ivan the Terrible and describe how he earned his nickname, identify Vladimir as the 10th century Grand Prince of Kiev who ordered Russians to convert to Orthodox Christianity, locate Russia on a map and identify its boundaries, land features, and cities. Matching. The Slavs were Eastern Europeans who first settled along a network of rivers in what later became Russia. Vikings were Scandinavians who traveled and settled along rivers in a region that eventually became Russia. Kiev was an important city. It became the capital of Russia. Boyars were landowning nobles of Russian cities. Vladimir was the Prince of Kiev who chose an official state religion, an Eastern Orthodox Church, the religion that began to thrive in Russia after 988. Invasion of Russia. Huge armies of Mongols invaded Russia in the 13th century. The invaders, who came to be called Tatars, were ruthless. They destroyed whole towns, killing entire populations. They leveled cities and looted treasures. The policy of terror caused Russians to view the Tatars as invincible. Ivan the Great, Ivan III. Ivan the Great, or Ivan III, gained territory and power within Russia in several ways. He bought his rivals' land. He persuaded and forced dying princes to leave their territories to him. He waged war. He deported troublemaking boyars. And he took millions of acres of land from boyars and gave it to men who served in his army and government. The end of Tatar rule in Russia. Ivan the Great stopped sending tribute to the Tatar court. In 1480, he announced he would no longer give his allegiance to the Tatar Empire. After a standoff between a Tatar army and Ivan's army, the Tatars retreated and left Russia to its native inhabitants. Russian Orthodox Church. The Russians gradually developed their own version of Christianity, calling it the Russian Orthodox Church. During the rule of the Tatars, there was limited communication between Russian Christians and Eastern Orthodox Christians in other regions. The isolated Russians adapted the religion. They conducted church services and read scripture in Russian. Ivan the Great, Tsar. Ivan the Great believed that Moscow had replaced Rome and Constantinople as the new center of Christianity. He married a Byzantine princess and even took a title from ancient Rome. He called himself Tsar, which comes from the Latin word Caesar, and that Tsar is pronounced with a Z, Tsar. Ivan III and the Kremlin. This is a who, what, when, where, why, how format for the next few slides. Who, Ivan the Great and Italian builders. What, Ivan built the Kremlin. Where, Moscow. When, the late 15th and early 16th centuries. Why, it was old and crumbling. Ivan wanted a mighty fortress and a symbol of Russia's power. And how, European architects and engineers designed and built new walls, towers, and a moat. They also built a palace and 3 great stone cathedrals. Ivan the Terrible, also known as Ivan IV. Ivan the Terrible's early years as a young Tsar. Who, Ivan the Terrible, his mother, and powerful boyars. What, he was a mean young ruler, crowned Tsar of Russia at age 17. He promised to rule in the interest of the people, made little effort to look after Russia's peasant farmers. Where, Russia, Moscow. When, 1547, he was crowned Tsar. Life as a peasant in Russia. Who? Russian peasants. What? Peasants lived hard lives. They were poor. Landowners treated many of them as property. Many became serfs, legally bound to the land. Where? Russia. When? The 16th century. St. Basil's. Who? Ivan the Terrible, the Russian architect. What? Ivan ordered the construction of a cathedral and hired a Russian architect. It had a main church with a high tower and 8 small chapels with unique domes. Where? Moscow, Russia. When? The 16th century. Why? Ivan wanted to astonish people who saw the cathedral. And how? That's not really applicable for this question. End of Ivan IV's reign. Who? Ivan the Terrible, or Ivan IV. What? His behavior became more bizarre. He used secret police to terrorize his subjects. He killed his eldest son. He killed many of the boyar class. He died of a disease and left behind a vast empire. His reign of terror left Russia small in spirit and isolated from the West. Where? Russia. And when? The 16th century. It was 1584 when he died. And that comes to the end of this split video lesson. Thank you for joining me today.